"Don't stop, I need it," whispered the Apache woman to the rancher by candlelight. The rancher had always preferred the quiet life. His ranch stretched over rolling hills dotted with sturdy oak trees and wide open spaces. The mornings were filled with the sound of horses and the soft lowing of cows, and the nights were calm, with only the wind and the distant hoot of an owl breaking the silence. He had grown used to this solitude over the years. After all, life on a ranch was hard work, and it was easier to trust the land than people. One late afternoon, as the sun was beginning to dip below the horizon and painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson, he noticed someone walking along the edge of his property. At first, he thought it might be a traveler lost in the hills, or perhaps someone passing by. But as the figure came closer, he could see that it was a woman. She moved with a quiet confidence, as if she belonged to the land around her. Yet there was something different about her. The woman was Apache, her dark hair tied back in a simple braid, and her eyes carried a depth that seemed to hold stories of generations. She walked steadily toward him, her boots stirring up little puffs of dust. The rancher instinctively reached for the brim of his hat, tipping it slightly in greeting. "Evening," he said, his voice rough from years of calling out to cattle. "Evening," she replied, her voice soft but certain. She paused a few steps away, studying the rancher with a mixture of curiosity and caution. There was a calmness about her that put him slightly off guard. He wasn't used to visitors, and certainly not to someone who seemed to carry herself with such quiet strength. "I'm sorry if I'm trespassing," she said. "I didn't mean to intrude. I was just passing through and I thought I might ask for some water, if that's all right." The rancher hesitated for a moment. It wasn't common for strangers to wander onto his land. But there was something in her eyes, something honest and unafraid, that made him nod. "Sure," he said. "Come on. There's water in the cabin." As they walked toward the small wooden cabin near the center of the ranch, he noticed her observing everything: the fences, the horses, the small vegetable patch near the back. She seemed to see the life he had built, and yet there was no judgment in her gaze, only recognition. Inside, he poured water into a tin cup and handed it to her. She took it with both hands, her fingers brushing his briefly, and he felt a strange warmth at the contact. She drank slowly, as if savoring every drop. He watched her quietly, unsure of what to say next. "I'm glad you didn't chase me off," she finally said, breaking the silence. "Most people wouldn't be so welcoming."
The rancher shrugged. "Most people don't live out here."
"It's not exactly easy to find, and I don't usually have visitors." He paused, then added, "Name's Tom. Tom Henderson." She nodded politely. "I'm Ayana," she said. Ayana Redhawk. They stood in silence for a moment, each trying to understand the other. There was a connection, subtle but undeniable, that neither of them could explain. Tom could feel it in the way her eyes held his gaze, steady and unafraid. Ayana could feel it in the quiet confidence he exuded, in the way he moved and spoke with care.
"I was on my way to visit family nearby," she explained after a while. "I didn't expect to find a ranch like this out here."
"It's peaceful." Tom nodded, glad that she appreciated the land as much as he did.
"It is," he said simply.
"Takes a lot of work, but it's worth it." She smiled softly, a small, almost shy smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. There was a shadow there, a hint of something she had been carrying for a long time. Tom didn't press her. He had learned over the years that some things needed time to be revealed. Over the next hour, they talked quietly. Tom shared stories about the ranch, the animals, and the challenges of living in such a remote place. Ayana listened intently, asking questions here and there, but mostly she seemed to be absorbing everything in silence. There was an ease between them that was rare, a feeling that words weren't always necessary to communicate.
As the sun disappeared completely behind the hills, Tom lit a few lanterns in the cabin.
The warm glow cast soft shadows on the walls, and the two of them moved around each other as if they were familiar with the space, though they had only just met.
Ayana's eyes reflected the light, and Tom couldn't help but notice the calm determination in her expression.
She was a woman who had seen much in life, yet she carried herself with grace and strength. "I should be going soon," Ayanna said quietly, almost reluctantly.
"I don't want to overstay my welcome." Tom shook his head. "You're welcome here. You're safe. If you need to rest for a bit before heading out, you can stay the night." He didn't want to sound too forward, but there was a protective instinct in him that he couldn't ignore. She hesitated, then nodded. "Thank you. I appreciate it." That night, as they shared a simple meal by the fire, Tom noticed how carefully she ate, as if savoring each bite. She told him small stories about her childhood and the lessons her family had taught her. There was a quiet intensity in the way she spoke, a wisdom beyond her years. Tom found himself drawn in not just by her words, but by the feeling that she understood the world in a way he sometimes struggled to comprehend. After dinner, they sat in the living room, the fire crackling softly. The silence between them was comfortable, not awkward, and Tom realized that he had not felt this at ease with anyone in a long time. He was used to hard work and long days, but the presence of someone who could sit quietly with him, who didn't need constant conversation to fill the space, was a strange and welcome change. Ayanna looked around the cabin, her eyes resting on the small personal touches. Pictures of his family, a few handmade decorations, the careful arrangement of furniture. She seemed to see the life he had built, the effort and care that went into every detail. And yet, she didn't judge it. She only seemed to appreciate it. Tom felt an unusual sense of openness that he hadn't experienced in years. He found himself wanting to know more about her, to understand the experiences that had shaped her into the woman she was. And though he had always been cautious about letting anyone close, there was something about Ayanna that made him feel it was safe to open up. As the night grew darker, Ayanna stood and moved to the window, looking out at the stars. The ranch was quiet. The only sound the distant calls of nocturnal animals and the rustle of leaves in the wind. She seemed to find a strange peace in the darkness, a moment to collect her thoughts. Tom watched her, wondering what memories or worries lingered behind her calm exterior. Finally, she turned to him, her eyes meeting his in the dim light. "You have a good heart," she said softly. "It shows in everything you do here." Tom felt a warmth in his chest at her words. Compliments were not common in his life, and to hear such sincerity from someone he respected deeply made him pause. "Thank you," he said, his voice quiet. "That means more than you might know." They talked a little longer, sharing small anecdotes and quiet laughter, until the night became late. Ayanna decided to rest in one of the spare rooms, and Tom left her to settle in, feeling a strange mixture of curiosity and concern for this woman who had entered his life so suddenly. As he went to bed himself, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was the start of something significant. There was an energy in the cabin, a sense that both of their lives were about to change in ways neither of them could yet understand. And though he didn't fully realize it, the bond between them had already begun to form, one built on trust, respect, and a quiet understanding that words alone could not capture. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the faint scent of sage and earth. The rancher lay awake for a while, thinking of Ayanna, her strength, and the mystery she brought into his life. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in years, he felt a sense of anticipation, a hope that something new and meaningful had entered his world. And so, as the ranch slept under the blanket of night, the first chapter of their story quietly began. One of connection, trust, and the slow, steady unfolding of something neither of them had expected, but both would come to cherish deeply. The next morning, the rancher Tom woke to the soft light of dawn spilling across the hills. The rooster's crow and the gentle lowing of the cows welcomed him back to another day of hard work. But unlike other mornings, there was a certain anticipation in the air, a quiet energy he couldn't quite explain. Ayanna had spent the night in the spare room, and though they had exchanged only brief greetings over breakfast, Tom felt her presence like a gentle weight beside him. She was already awake when he walked into the kitchen, standing near the small wood stove that cast a warm glow over the room. She was humming softly, her movements deliberate as she poured water into a kettle for tea. Tom watched her for a moment, noticing how natural she seemed in this simple space. There was no pretension, no effort to impress, just a quiet elegance that drew him in. "Morning," he said,
breaking the silence. "Morning," she replied, turning her gaze toward him and offering a small smile. "I hope I'm not disturbing your routine." Tom shook his head. "No, not at all."
Things are slower in the morning anyway. He moved to prepare breakfast, enjoying the quiet companionship. They didn't need to fill every moment with words. The soft clatter of utensils, the crackle of the stove, and their shared glances created a rhythm that felt oddly comforting. Once breakfast was over, Tom decided to take Ayanna on a small walk around the ranch. The sun was rising higher, painting the fields in gold and illuminating the morning mist. As they walked, he explained the details of the land, the care required for the animals, and the small routines that kept the ranch running smoothly. Ayanna listened attentively, asking questions here and there, but mostly observing. "You really know this land," she said finally, her voice quiet but filled with admiration. "I can see why you've stayed here all these years. It's more than just a ranch. It feels alive." Tom smiled, feeling a warmth in his chest. "It is alive," he admitted. "Every tree, every animal, every little patch of soil has its own story. You learn to respect it, or it will remind you quickly." They reached a small creek that ran along the edge of the property. The water sparkled in the sunlight, and the sound of it flowing over rocks was soothing. Ayanna knelt beside the creek, running her fingers through the cool water. Tom sat on a nearby rock, watching her, noticing the way she seemed to absorb every detail of her surroundings. "You're very observant," he said quietly. She looked up at him, her eyes meeting his. "I have to be," she said softly. "My family taught me that." You notice the small things, and you can understand a lot about the world and the people in it. There was a pause, filled only by the gentle gurgle of the creek and the distant call of a bird. Tom felt an unusual sense of closeness with her. It was rare for him to meet someone who didn't just listen, but truly understood the importance of seeing and noticing. As the day wore on, they returned to the cabin, carrying a few supplies for the animals, and talking occasionally. The ease between them grew with each passing hour. Tom found himself sharing stories he had never told anyone. The time a storm nearly destroyed the barn, the first horse he had ever raised, and even small personal memories from his youth. Ayanna listened without judgment, her presence calm and grounding. By late afternoon, the sun had begun to lower, casting long shadows across the ranch. Ayanna suggested they sit inside the cabin to rest. Tom agreed, lighting a few candles to chase away the early evening gloom. The soft flicker of light created a warm, intimate atmosphere, and for a moment, the outside world seemed to vanish. They sat near the fire, and Ayanna reached for a small notebook she had brought along. She began sketching quietly, her pencil moving with precision across the pages. Tom watched her, fascinated by her focus and the calm determination she displayed. After a while, she glanced up at him, her eyes reflecting the candlelight. "I've always found comfort in drawing," she said softly. "It helps me process things when words aren't enough." Tom nodded, understanding more than she realized. "Sometimes actions speak louder than words," he said. "And sometimes just being here, sitting with someone, can mean more than anything you can say." There was a moment of silence, filled with unspoken understanding. Ayanna's eyes lingered on his face, searching, questioning, and yet trusting at the same time. Tom felt a tug at his heart, a desire to protect, to comfort, to be part of her world in a way he hadn't allowed himself for years. As the night grew darker, Ayanna's expression changed slightly. There was a shadow of worry in her eyes, a flicker of vulnerability she rarely showed. She looked down at her hands, twisting them nervously. Tom noticed immediately and leaned slightly forward. "You can tell me if something's wrong," he said gently. "You don't have to carry it alone." She hesitated, her eyes meeting his briefly before dropping again. Then, in a quiet whisper, she spoke words that made Tom's heart skip a beat. "Don't stop. I need it." The words hung in the air, soft and fragile, yet full of meaning. Tom's brow furrowed slightly, not in confusion, but in concern. He understood immediately that she wasn't speaking about anything trivial. She was asking for help, for comfort, for support.
in a way that went beyond mere conversation. She needed someone she could trust, someone who would stand with her. He reached out, placing a steady hand over hers. "I'm here," he said quietly. "You're not alone. I'll help you, whatever it takes." Ayanna looked at him, her eyes reflecting relief, gratitude, and something deeper. Trust. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to be vulnerable, to show that she needed someone. And Tom, feeling the weight of her trust, understood the responsibility and the honor of that moment. They talked for hours, sharing stories and fears, laughter and quiet tears. Ayanna revealed bits of her past, challenges she had faced, family struggles, and moments of loneliness. Tom shared his own experiences, not holding back, revealing the moments that had shaped him. Each story, each confession brought them closer, weaving an invisible bond that neither of them could ignore. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying the scents of earth and sage. The ranch was quiet yet alive with the presence of two people slowly discovering each other. The night seemed endless, and yet, for both of them, time moved in a strange, comfortable rhythm. Minutes stretched into hours, and each moment was savored. As the candles burned lower, Ayanna leaned back in her chair, exhaustion finally catching up with her. Tom watched her, feeling a protective urge rise within him. He moved to adjust the blanket draped over her shoulders, careful not to disturb her. She looked at him with a soft smile, a silent acknowledgement of the trust she had placed in him. "I don't know how I can ever thank you," she said quietly. "You don't need to," he replied. "Just being here is enough. We're stronger when we face things together." The fire crackled, filling the silence between them. Tom felt a profound sense of connection, a feeling that this night would remain with him forever. Ayanna's presence had brought something into his life he hadn't realized he was missing: companionship, understanding, and the quiet certainty that he could make a difference in someone's life. Finally, Ayanna excused herself to the spare room, and Tom returned to his own space. But sleep did not come immediately. He lay awake, thinking of the words she had whispered, the trust she had shown, and the bond that had begun to form. The night outside was calm, but inside, his mind and heart were alive with possibilities. He realized that life on the ranch, though quiet and predictable, had room for something more, something that went beyond routine and labor. It could hold connection, understanding, and the beginnings of something meaningful. And Ayanna, with her quiet strength and vulnerability, had become a part of that possibility. As the night deepened, Tom finally drifted into a light sleep, the memory of her words lingering in his mind. Outside, the stars shone brightly, and the wind carried the promise of a new day. Tomorrow, he knew, would bring new challenges and new moments. But for now, there was peace. And for the first time in a long while, he felt that he wasn't facing the world alone. The morning after the candlelight night, the ranch was unusually quiet. Tom rose early as usual, preparing the feed and checking the fences. But there was an uneasy feeling in the air. The sky, once clear, had begun to fill with dark, heavy clouds, hinting at an approaching storm. Tom frowned as he walked among the fields, scanning the horizon. Something about the wind and the way the trees swayed made him uneasy. Ayanna had woken even earlier, her movements calm and deliberate as she helped Tom gather supplies. She noticed his worry and placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Is something wrong?" she asked softly. "I don't know," Tom admitted. "Storm's coming, but it feels stronger than usual. I think we might have trouble if it hits." Ayanna nodded, her eyes thoughtful. "Then we need to prepare. Together." Together they moved quickly. Tom led her to the barn, explaining what needed to be done, tying down loose equipment, bringing in the horses, and securing the smaller animals. Ayanna followed his instructions with care, moving efficiently yet calmly. Despite the looming threat, there was a sense of teamwork between them. They communicated silently at times, each knowing what the other needed without speaking. The clouds darkened, and the first drops of rain began to fall. Soon, the rain became a steady downpour, hammering against the roof and windows. The wind howled across the hills, threatening to tear down anything left unsecured. Inside the barn, the animals were restless, sensing the storm's strength. Tom moved among them, checking that each was safe, while Ayanna held the smaller animals close, whispering soft, calming words. Suddenly, a loud crack of thunder echoed through the valley, and the barn door rattled violently. Tom moved to secure it, but the wind was relentless. Ayanna stepped forward, placing a hand on his arm. "Let me help," she said firmly. Together they managed to reinforce the door, their hands moving quickly and efficiently. The physical effort brought them closer, and though the storm raged outside, there was a sense of shared purpose and connection inside. As the storm intensified, a tree on the edge of the property began to crack under the force of the wind. Tom's eyes widened in alarm. "That tree could fall on the barn if we don't do something," he shouted over the noise. Ayanna's eyes were sharp and focused. "We need to move the animals first. I'll help you." They worked frantically, guiding the horses and cattle to a safer part of the barn, moving smaller animals into secure pens. The wind tore at their clothes and hair, rain soaking them to the bone, but neither of them faltered. Their trust in each other grew with every movement, every shared glance, every decision made together. Finally, after what felt like hours, the immediate danger passed. The tree had fallen, but it landed far enough from the barn to avoid destruction. The animals were safe, huddled together, wet and nervous, but unharmed. Tom sank to the ground exhausted, and Ayanna sat beside him, her clothes soaked, her hair plastered to her face. "We did it," she said quietly, her voice a mixture of relief and disbelief. "We really did it," Tom nodded, a tired smile on his face.
Yeah, we did.
"Couldn't have done it without you." For a moment they simply sat there, catching their breath and letting the reality of the situation sink in. The storm had tested them in ways neither of them had expected, forcing them to rely on each other completely, and through that reliance, a deeper bond had formed. One built on trust, teamwork, and shared courage. As the rain began to lighten, Tom suggested they check the rest of the property. Together they walked through the fields, inspecting fences, buildings, and water sources. Ayanna's sharp eyes noticed small problems that Tom might have missed, and he admired her attention to detail. They laughed together at minor inconveniences and sighed at the things that would need repair, their teamwork seamless. By late afternoon, the storm had passed completely, leaving the ranch drenched but intact. The air smelled of wet earth and fresh growth, and the sunlight broke through the clouds, casting rainbows across the fields. Tom and Ayanna stood together on a small hill, taking in the view. "You know," Ayanna said thoughtfully, "storms are frightening, but they also remind you of how strong you can be when you work together." Tom smiled, feeling a deep sense of connection. "Yeah. And sometimes they show you people you can trust with your life." Ayanna turned to him, her eyes reflecting the sunlight and the warmth she felt. "I trust you," she said simply. Those words, though few, carried a weight that neither of them could ignore. It wasn't just about surviving a storm. It was about opening themselves to someone else, about letting someone in, even after years of self-reliance and caution. The day continued with small tasks, repairing fences, tending to the animals, and cleaning up debris. Each task they completed together strengthened their bond. The physical work, combined with a shared emotional experience of the storm, created a connection that was unspoken but undeniable. As evening approached, they returned to the cabin, tired but satisfied. The fire was already warm, and the smell of freshly brewed tea filled the air. They sat together, sipping slowly, the quiet comfort of companionship settling over them. "You were amazing today," Tom said quietly. "I don't think I could have handled all of that alone." Ayanna smiled, a small, proud smile that reached her eyes. "We handled it together. That's what matters." They sat in silence for a while, watching the fire flicker and listening to the gentle sounds of the ranch settling after the storm. Tom felt a sense of peace he hadn't experienced in years. There was something comforting about having someone by his side, someone who shared not just the work but the responsibility and care of life itself. Finally, Ayanna spoke,
her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you for letting me stay here. Or letting me be part of this."
Tom reached out and took her hand, squeezing it gently.
"You don't need to thank me," he said. "It's been good having you here. You've made this place feel even more alive." There was a softness in the air, a quiet intimacy that neither of them had expected. The storm had tested them, pushed them to their limits, and through it, they had discovered something profound about each other. Trust, courage, and shared experiences had created a bond that neither could ignore. As night fell, they prepared a simple dinner and sat by candlelight once more. The flickering light reflected in Ayana's eyes, and Tom felt a pull toward her that was stronger than ever. It wasn't just admiration or gratitude. It was a deep, unspoken connection that had grown through shared trials and quiet moments alike. They talked long into the night, sharing memories, fears, and dreams. Ayana revealed stories of her family, the lessons she had learned, and the moments that had shaped her. Tom shared his own experiences, opening up in ways he hadn't in years. Every word, every glance, every touch was a step closer to understanding, acceptance, and trust. By the time they finally settled into their rooms, there was a sense of completion and anticipation. The day had been challenging, exhausting, and emotional, but it had also been transformative. They had faced the storm together, and in doing so, they had discovered something more profound than either could have imagined. Tom lay in bed, listening to the soft sounds of the night outside. His mind replayed the day's events, the fear, the teamwork, the trust, and the quiet moments of connection. He realized that life on the ranch, though often solitary and demanding, could also be shared, and that sharing brought its own strength, warmth, and meaning. Ayana, in her room, reflected on the day as well. She had faced fear, relied on someone else, and been trusted in return. It was a rare and precious experience, one that left her feeling safe, understood, and unexpectedly hopeful for the future. Outside, the stars shone brightly over the ranch, and the gentle rustle of leaves in the trees seemed to echo the promise of new beginnings. Both Tom and Ayana knew, without saying it, that their lives had changed in ways that would ripple far beyond this single day. The storm had tested them, but it had also brought them together, forging a bond built on courage, trust, and shared experience. And as they drifted into sleep, each with thoughts of the other, a quiet understanding settled between them, one that would guide the coming days, shaping their connection and their journey, and preparing them for whatever challenges or joys the future might hold. The next morning, the ranch was calm, bathed in soft golden sunlight. The storm from the previous day had left the earth wet and rich, and the air smelled fresh and alive. Tom moved about his usual chores with a sense of peace he hadn't felt in years, yet a quiet excitement lingered in his chest. Ayana had slept longer than usual, and he found himself thinking about her constantly, wondering what she was feeling after the day of challenges they had faced together. Ayana finally emerged from the spare room, her hair damp from washing, her cheeks flushed from the warmth of the cabin. She smiled softly at Tom, and for a moment, neither spoke. The simple exchange carried a depth of understanding, an acknowledgement of all they had shared and endured. "Morning," Tom said quietly.
"Morning," she replied, her voice calm but filled with warmth. "The ranch looks even more alive after the storm." Tom nodded, appreciating the way she saw things, how she noticed the subtle beauty in small details.
"It does," he agreed, "and it's quieter too, in a good way." They moved through the morning together, tending to the animals, repairing minor damage from the storm, and ensuring everything was in order. Their teamwork had become seamless, each anticipating the other's movements and needs. There was a quiet joy in their shared effort, a sense of connection that went beyond simple companionship. After finishing their chores, Tom suggested they take a break and sit outside, enjoying the sunshine. They settled on the small porch, the soft breeze rustling through the trees. Ayana picked up a notebook and began sketching again, capturing the beauty of the ranch in the gentle light. Tom watched her for a moment, captivated by the focus and serenity she carried. "You really see things in a special way," he said softly. Ayana glanced at him,
a small smile playing on her lips. I try to notice the little things. They often matter more than the big ones. Tom nodded, feeling a deep appreciation for her perspective. You've changed the way I look at things too, he admitted. Not just the ranch, but life in general. She looked down, a hint of shyness in her expression.
I didn't mean to, influence you.
You did, he said quietly. And I'm glad. There was a comfortable silence between them as they watched the sun move higher, casting shadows across the fields. Tom felt a strange mix of anticipation and nervousness. He wanted to say something, to acknowledge the bond that had formed between them, but he wasn't sure how to begin. Ayanna, sensing the change in his demeanor, set aside her notebook and turned to him. Tom, she began softly, her voice tentative. I feel something has changed between us. I don't want to rush it, but I can't ignore it either. Tom's heart pounded in his chest. He reached for her hand, holding it gently in his. I feel it too, he admitted. I felt it since the first night you stayed here. But after the storm yesterday, I realized just how important you are to me. Her eyes filled with emotion, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. The world around them faded, leaving only the quiet connection of two hearts opening to one another. Ayanna squeezed his hand, a silent affirmation of trust and mutual understanding. I've always been cautious, she said finally, her voice steady. But with you, I feel safe, I feel understood. And that means more to me than I can say. Tom smiled, feeling a deep sense of relief and joy. You don't have to say more, he replied. I understand. And I want you to know that I'm here, for whatever you need. They sat together in silence for a while, the bond between them strengthening with each passing moment. It wasn't just trust, it was something deeper, a shared understanding that they could rely on each other in ways neither had allowed before. As the afternoon sun began to dip, casting long shadows across the ranch, Tom suggested they take a walk. They moved along the familiar paths, the gentle rustling of leaves and distant calls of birds providing a serene soundtrack. The world felt expansive yet intimate, as if it existed just for the two of them. I never imagined meeting someone like you, Tom said quietly. Someone who can challenge me, understand me, and yet make life feel lighter.
Ayanna looked at him, her eyes reflecting the soft glow of the setting sun. And I never imagined finding someone I could trust so completely, she admitted.
You've shown me that it's possible to rely on someone, to share both strength and vulnerability. They paused near a small hill overlooking the ranch. The view was breathtaking, with fields stretching into the horizon and the remnants of the storm glistening in puddles in wet earth. Tom reached for Ayanna's hand again, intertwining their fingers. I don't want to hide anything from you, he said softly. I want us to face life together with all its challenges and joys. Ayanna nodded, tears glimmering in her eyes. I want that too, she whispered. With you. They stayed there for a long time, simply holding hands and watching the world. The shared silence was comfortable, filled with unspoken promises and understanding. Each had come to realize that trust, patience, and openness were the foundation of something far deeper than either had expected. As evening fell, they returned to the cabin. Tom lit the fireplace, and the warm glow filled the room. Ayanna moved to sit nearby, her presence calm and reassuring. They shared a simple meal together, each bite flavored with comfort, connection, and the knowledge that they were no longer alone in facing the world. After dinner, they sat by the fire, the room bathed in a soft orange glow. Ayanna leaned back in her chair, her eyes reflecting the flickering flames. Tom watched her for a moment, feeling a swell of affection and admiration. You've brought so much into my life, he said quietly. Strength, understanding, and hope. Ayanna smiled, a gentle, radiant smile that warmed the room. And you've shown me kindness, protection, and the power of trust. I never thought I'd feel this safe, this understood. The fire crackled softly, and Tom reached out to brush a stray lock of hair from her face. I want you to know, he said, that I'll always be here, for anything you need, for every storm, for every quiet moment.
You can count on me." Her eyes filled with tears of gratitude and emotion, and she whispered, "I know, and I'll always be here for you too." The night grew late, but neither moved to leave the fire. They simply sat together, hands intertwined, hearts open, and minds at peace. The bond between them had been tested, strengthened, and affirmed. They had faced challenges together, shared vulnerabilities, and discovered the profound connection that comes from trust, patience, and understanding. Finally, Ayanna rose and moved to her room, glancing back at Tom with a soft smile. "Good night," she said quietly. "Good night," he replied, feeling the warmth of her presence lingering even as she left the room. As he settled into his bed, Tom reflected on the journey of the past days. From the first unexpected encounter to the storm that had tested their courage, and now to this moment of emotional closeness, he realized that life had changed in ways he could never have predicted. The ranch, the land, and the work remained important, but something far more significant had entered his life. A bond with someone who saw him, understood him, and accepted him fully. Ayanna, in her room, lay awake for a while as well, thinking of Tom and the moments they had shared. She felt a sense of peace, warmth, and hope that she hadn't felt in a long time. She realized that trust and openness could lead to profound connection, and she was grateful for every challenge and quiet moment that had brought them together. Outside, the stars shone brightly over the ranch, reflecting on the wet earth and the calm air. The night was serene, yet alive with a sense of possibilities ahead. Both Tom and Ayanna knew that life would continue to bring challenges, but they also knew that together they could face anything. Their bond had been forged through shared experiences, mutual trust, and heartfelt understanding. As sleep finally took them, both felt the comforting presence of the other, even in dreams. The ranch, once a place of solitude, had become a home filled with trust, warmth, and connection. And in that quiet peace, they both knew that this was only the beginning of a journey that would grow stronger with each passing day. The next morning they would rise together, tending to the ranch, facing whatever challenges came their way and cherishing the bond that had been built. For now, though, the night held them in its gentle embrace, a promise of trust, hope, and a shared future that neither would ever forget.